Hello and welcome to another instalment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Michael Dryden and Etches Adogru. Today, we'll be taking a look at how Brexit will affect British football, the movement of players, and we'll discuss whether it will impact the quality of the Premier League. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Yfootball_ and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube. Hello, Etches. Good afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, fine, thanks. Congratulations on winning the pizza trophy. To all our listeners out there, you know, Tron's been on this earth now for 27 years, and that
Yep.
is probably the biggest achievement he's ever had in his lifetime. So if you're sitting at home listening in, just give him a round of applause, send him congratulations. He likes flowers, he likes chocolate, the whole sorts, because for him, life doesn't get better simply. So, Tron, congratulations once more.
Yeah, perfect description there. First went at Wembley in 38 years. I don't know if you've seen the trophy. It's enormous. It's like bigger than the old UEFA Cup. And there's a picture of like Charlie White out forward with like it on his head. And honestly, like I don't know how he survived. It's enormous. But yeah, it's a pretty irrelevant competition. But it was more if we'd lost that against a League Two team. Bearing in mind we're going for League One promotion this season, that's not good. And to be fair, they had some good chances. We could have lost that game, but it was
Yeah,
good.
but you won, mate. That's the be all and end all.
Yeah, you don't win the Pizza Cup every day, do you, Etches? So, I mean,
Are you
yeah.
going to get a tattoo of the date when you won it?
Yeah, well, they've actually a pizza shop, a Papa John's shop in Sunderland has changed its name to Papa Lee's. Although I don't understand why they didn't just change it to Papa Johnson because our manager is called Lee Johnson, so they changed it to Papa Lee's. So I might get Papa Lee's tattooed across my forearm, I think, in the insides. You know where like a lot
Forearm.
of Spanish, you know where like a lot of Spanish players get like tattoos on the inside of their forearm and they
Yeah,
kiss it when they go for celebration. So when
yeah.
I'm in Power League
Mm.
and I score a goal, I can celebrate by kissing the papalese on my wrist, point
Yeah.
to the air.
The only problem with that though is you got really thin forearms. I don't think you go to the gym, so I don't know if there'll be enough space.
Yeah, but a pretty small font, about 8 font.
So anyway, you get a magnifying glass, see what they've actually written. That's smart. That's a smart, very smart move there.
But yeah, it's good news all around, and now ready for the promotion charge. But we won't be affected by the topic we're discussing today on Brexit because I don't think we could any of our players would ever qualify for the work permit. But
Mm.
let's move on to that topic. So, what is Brexit?
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, we may have a few fans in some obscure countries, Nicaragua, Moldova,
Yep.
some countries that may be unaware. But
Hello to them.
Brexit, yeah, hello to them indeed. Brexit is a term used to describe the withdrawal of the UK from the EU. It was put towards the British public in a referendum, which won with a narrow majority of 51.9%. And as a result, we are leaving, which is brilliant news for some, for Phil and his dog maybe, and not so good news for others.
Yeah, but it's funny how Brexit dominated our lives, like on the news, and then COVID struck, and we didn't hear about it, and we barely heard about it for about 18 months because everyone was furiously trying to get football back on, and obviously COVID was such a big deal and is such a big deal. It's almost like people have just suddenly stopped caring. But
Yeah,
I'm glad it's not in the news, but at the same time, it is such a big thing, and we'll go on to how big it is in football.
yeah. My favorite thing about Brexit is when David Cameron said that no matter what happens in the Brexit deal, I'll be with you no matter what every step of the way. And when the referendum results came in, he was like, actually, just going to resign.
He didn't want to deal with that. He didn't want to
Don't
deal with
fancy it.
that.
Sorry, lads, I didn't fancy it. Didn't expect this result. It's not for me. Did I say that? I'm going to take that one away. So yeah, I don't think he particularly fancied it. But how it affects football, if you rewind to about 2016, all 20 Premier League clubs were against it. Obviously, for a variety of reasons, it impacts how they can recruit European talent.
Yeah.
It affects, how they control minors, so players between 16 and 18, as well as managers. It affects management as well when you're a Swansea or maybe a club low down the league and you want to pluck a real up and coming manager from Dynamo Zagreb. I shouldn't mention Dynamo Zagreb because their manager is in prison, but another club similar similar
Great
to
example.
that, then you won't be able to utilize him because of this new
Mm.
quota that will come in. However, fan favourite Neil Warnock went against the official Premier League line back then, saying, "To hell with the rest of the world," talking about the deliverance of Brexit. I can't wait to get out of it, if I'm honest. I think we're far better off out of the bloody thing in every aspect, football-wise as well. Absolutely. Thank you, Neil Warnock, for sharing.
He I mean, whether you agree with Warnock or not, you can't help but love the man. Question for you, Etches, on Neil Warnock. This is just a random fact that I know. How old is Neil Warnock?
Neil Warnock.
Yeah.
I think Neil Warnock was around when the first car was made. So what? I don't know. He must be like
First British
six.
car was made.
Yeah. What Rover? Do you remember
Yeah.
Rovers used to be about? Probably 65. I don't know.
He's 72,
He's 72.
so he's knocking about the Hodgson kind of years. He was born in 48, and he made his league debut for Chesterfield in 1967.
Wow.
So
That
he's no
that
spring chicken.
that is
Uh, and
that is
I
old indeed.
I implore you all to watch. So there's a Warnock documentary that came out. This is when he was at Sheffield United in his like
Yeah.
his I was gonna say his first stint, but his only stint actually as manager. Um, and it's like really poor quality, like in terms of how it's produced. It's on YouTube. It is outstanding to watch. Like he is just like he's like a walking parody. He's like a parody of himself, and he's just hilarious. And the whole thing is just great to watch. Like inside a dressing room with a manager like him. And actually, there's a clip on Twitter I saw where they were like doing like for like comparisons between like the Guardiola like clips from the Guardiola Man City documentary on Amazon, and
Mm.
then comparing that with like this old documentary of like Warnock. So it's like Guardiola like going through like this like tactical board in like this like super expensive like dressing room at the Etihad, and then it's like Warnock away to like I don't know, like just like Rotherham or something, like absolutely going mad at his team in the dressing room, like chucking things on the floor. It's outstanding.
When is he not going mad at someone, Neil Warnock? And also, why? No, I guess he is managed for a long time. I'm surprised there is a Neil Warnock documentary. That is, yeah.
Well, this
Do you
year
know?
is his 40th year,
Do you
40th year in
know? Do you
management.
know who needs a documentary? Steve Holloway.
Yeah.
Is that his name? Is it Chris Holloway? Who's the ex Blackpool manager? Is it Chris Holloway or is it
Ian
Steve Holloway?
Holloway.
Ian Holloway.
Steve
Yeah, yeah, yes. That's poor too. I'll take a fair. Live and learn. Live and learn. Sorry, Ian. That's
Mm.
poor. But yeah, a change of the rules of Brexit means that English clubs will not have the same freedom to hoover up the best of Europe's talent as before. From January 2021, a points-based system will be in place, meaning players from the European Union will now need to gain a governing body endorsement
Mm.
or GBE, subjecting them to the same criteria as overseas players. The points are awarded on a variety of things, so international appearances as well as club appearances, domestic and continental competitions, the standard of the league,
Mm.
and the standard of the league and the quality of club the player is coming from. So it's very complex. I was going to put it into the
Yeah.
pod, and I read it for about 10 minutes and fell asleep. So I thought I'll probably not. It's like a 20. I was expecting 2 pages max. It's like 25 pages. I was like, yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
It's not really worth doing it. I had to get the calculator out, and I thought, you know what? It's not worth my time. So getting a GB will be really not a problem for the vast majority of the Premier League's big money arrivals, but will obviously have a huge effect in the recruitment of youth players and players further down the pyramid, which I'll get onto in a bit. Premier League Chief Executive Richard Masters sounded confident at the time when he spoke about how it wouldn't affect English football when discussing the post-Brexit arrangements. You know, he was basically saying we'll still be able to recruit the best, it'll still remain the best league in the world. Everything you want to hear, because why would he say otherwise?
Mm.
But you know,
Yeah.
the facts are facts. Where Britain's withdrawal from the EU means the Premier League just don't benefit from not just signing European talent, whether they're 25, 26, but in particular signing minors. So they're now completely banned from signing players under the age of 18 which means, when Cesc Fabregas moved and from Barcelona
Yeah,
to Arsenal, Gerard Piqué moved from Barcelona to Man United, Paul Pogba, they will no
yeah,
longer be able to move under these new rules. So when we're seeing these elite kids, Serge Gnabry is another one. I'm sure there's the whole host of others in Europe. It'll be a
yeah.
lot harder for these players to move, which has benefits as well as negatives. And the same applies to managers. So Ollie at the wheel, everyone's favourite Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, is unlikely to have been granted a GBE because most of his coaching career was in Norway. Apart from that ill-fated spell at Cardiff, where he was rubbish.
Yeah, it was terrible. And when he came to United, I was like, surely not. Like, this has got to be. I mean, everyone. I do actually think he needs a bit of credit.
I just love saying Ollie at the wheel. I don't know why it makes me laugh. I don't know why it makes me laugh so much. But yeah, he probably wouldn't have been given one, but you can, appeal to the panels for an exemption, as this was the case with Amad Diallo, because he was the first player to move when the rules were applied in January, from Atalanta to Man United. But obviously, he's hardly played for Ivory Coast and has hardly played for
Yeah.
Atalanta. So yeah, he was the first player to be awarded that, and I'm sure many more big talents will have exemptions given to them when they move from Europe for the bigger sides, but I'm not too sure the same will be the case for, let's say, your Preston North Ends and your
Sunderland.
Sunderlands.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't say I disagree with FIFA's rule of restricting the movement of 16 to 18-year-olds, and I've not often been a huge fan of FIFA and their rule making on this podcast. But yeah, I mean the movement of 16 to 18-year-olds overseas, it's very young to be making a move at 16, for example, like Fabregas did, overseas, even if that is within Europe. Um, and I do think that's not a bad thing, although I'm unsure how it is going to be enforced. I mean, you touched on the Diallo deal, which is post Brexit. And so I'm unsure how it's going to be enforced. I mean, they've had the transfer embargo of Barca as well, or the signing of youth. So in practice, hopefully it is actually kept on top of. But I'm always skeptical of how these things are policed. And that said, as well, even though I'm in favour of that in terms of the movement of players, if you're a player in a poorly developed nation, it is actually a bit of a benefit to you if you're 16 and you are a wonder kid and you play in a nation that is poorly developed in terms of football and you can't move overseas, and it actually could be a negative for your career. And we've seen the bad side of that. We've seen players in, say, Africa, for example, who this is usually by agents who are touted by agents, brought overseas. If they don't make it, they're left to their own devices, and it's
Yeah,
a negative for them. So that can happen. However, in a country like England, or if it's coming from a country like Spain, I just think often these players are getting big incentives to move overseas, like there have been for players from, um, say, like a player like Fabregas coming over to England. They're getting big packages. They're getting the promises. Is that healthy?
that's a good point. I think what we might see, which will come on to, is it's just England's loss, because it doesn't affect Germany, Spain, Portugal, Holland,
Yeah, definitely.
Belgium.
Yeah,
It doesn't affect any of them, unless if it's
yeah.
English talent. It's affecting England's ability to recruit these foreign players. So only time will tell if it impacts that. Or what we might see is the next Didier Ndong. Instead of him coming from France, you might see him growing up in England and developed here, because that's what we need in our national team. So
Didier Ndong.
I
What a
mean,
shocking transfer he was.
everybody needs a Didier Ndong, so that could potentially occur. So moving on to how it will affect clubs, which is such an open-ended discussion because you don't actually know, and clubs respond in all these different types of ways. I
Yeah.
think what it will do is it will affect how clubs approach and buy players that aren't elite internationals or playing in weaker leagues. So Neil Lennon said, or former Celtic manager Neil Lennon said, that Celtic would need to look at British players instead of European players because they simply wouldn't be able to get
Mm.
permits. I've seen articles saying that Timu Puki, because he's played a lot for Finland, but Finland are not very good, he wouldn't have been able to have qualified when he moved to Norwich. That would have been a bit of a
Yeah.
problem. So, he's come to the Premier League now and scored 11 goals. He's been a bagsman in the Championship. I think he's got 20 plus
Yeah, he has. Yeah.
in the seasons he's been down there. So obviously the quality isn't an issue, but it's more of a case of actually getting a permit. So, if Celtic then look further further close to home, then that could do other things as well, like drive up prices, which I'll come on to.
Mm.
But even bigger clubs, so Celtic, are a huge club, fan base and stuff. But in terms of on the field performances, they're not brilliant. Sorry, any Celtic fans, don't come at me. But someone like Everton with Seamus Coleman, Seamus Coleman signed from Sligo Rovers. He made a handful of Irish youth appearances who aren't really a footballing powerhouse. So due to the quality of his league, lack of international appearances and club appearances, and the performance of Sligo continentally, that deal would have failed.
Mm.
And Coleman has been PFA Team of the Year. He's been Everton's Player of the Year, been such a reliable right back for so many years that it's a shame that we may miss these types of players because of the rules that are in place, because we're not talking about it from a sense of quality. It's not as if, oh, these guys are rubbish. It's like these guys have shown that the quality, and now we're closing the door to so many others who could be.
Yeah, yeah, and Coleman. I mean, Coleman. How long has he played in the top flight? I mean, he's been a regular star at Everton since Moyes. I mean, Moyes signed him.
Yeah,
He's been there for around 15 years. I mean,
yeah,
it's been an incredible career for someone like him. I mean, there's been other Irish talent that have came into England. I mean, think about the big Niall Quinn at Sunderland. But um, I do feel as if there might be an exception made to this rule for Irish talent or for Ireland and
yeah.
moving across to Britain, because it's so close geographically. They're largely an English-speaking country. Obviously, Premier League is the biggest league in the world, arguably,
Mm,
is English-speaking. Uh, quotation marks around that. And you've also got things like not even just England, but like in Wales and Scotland as well. They will have a mix of British talent there as well. Celtic has roots with Ireland historically, and what now they can't sign Irish players. So it's
mm.
just a really interesting point. I feel as if there might be an exception made there, and to an extent, I actually hope there is, because we've had a lot of good Irish talent come into England and into the SPL and into the Welsh League. I don't think that should end.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think there's been some real top quality players that have come from Ireland, and there's a few now who are really talented. I know Parrott, I think his name's Troy Parrott at Tottenham, who represents
Yeah,
Ireland at the moment on Irish Youth International. He looks really, really good. So for those that are actually coming from the Irish League, it'd be sad to see those potential doors closed. Another point
mm.
which I touched on earlier is, less European talent is great for the English football pyramid. I actually did a thumbs up as I did that. I don't know why, but yeah, it's great for. It's great because more money stays within the English pyramid. We talk a lot about how money doesn't trickle down and how it affects smaller clubs and serves the elite and all that. So that does benefit English clubs because people have to look close to home. But what that does is it drives prices even further. I'd be very surprised if we see our European counterparts sign top English talent anymore,
Yeah.
because I think the prices are going to get really, really crazy. We're seeing Jack Grealish touted at 100 million. I would expect, the way Brexit is going to impact English football, its price will go even higher, which is good for the smaller clubs so they don't, run out of money, etc. And also, it will cause clubs to look further down the leagues. We discussed not too long ago about how clubs don't look at the Championship, where there's some top talent there, where clubs kind of think, yeah,
Mm.
we could sign this guy in Europe for half the price. Where now with Brexit, that could really be more of a case where we're seeing the top Championship ballers. I know you did a piece recently on Ivan Toney. We
Yeah,
could see
Vittoria.
them moving to bigger clubs a lot quicker, and probably for more money too. I think the final point is also just more emphasis on British talent within academies. I think British football is in a much better place than before. But if you championed this 10 years ago, people would be jumping at you because of how not poor, but not brilliant the English academy system was.
Yeah.
So obviously less foreigners in that means more British players. And Gareth Southgate can stop crying, saying, "Oh, I've only got 25% English players to pick from, and Germany have 50%. It's not fair." So, this could also drive the number of British players coming through up, which is obviously good for the national team as well as quotas for a variety of clubs.
Yeah, some cracking points there. I do think money staying within the British game is beneficial because you could see a greater distribution of wealth outside of the Premier League, because a demand for talent in the EFL, in the SPL, in Northern Ireland and Wales, for example, means that Premier League clubs, Championship clubs have to spend that money rather than a team like even Brentford, who bought so well, and they bought Tony, for example, who is
Mm.
a English talent. Um, they've bought abroad, bought overseas. Sorry, quite often it'll force basically every team in each kind of layer of the pyramid to look down further below them, which in theory should increase mobility of those players coming up the leagues, which in theory should only benefit the talent that is grown in this country, and then benefit teams in the EFL financially if teams in the Premier League have to then pay premium for those players. In theory, that should then create a redistribution of wealth. But I think the question is, does it really benefit British youth? Because as I've just described there, yeah, you may have a better mobility of players coming up the leagues, but there is these academies in England now, and especially in Premier League clubs, their academy systems are huge. They have centres of excellence. They have, a lot of the top six teams are hoovering up talent under the elite player performance plan, and there's so many players within the academy system. But now we start to see a lot of players go out to Europe, and everyone was really encouraged by the Jude Bellinghams, the Ademola Lookmans, and Sancho's going out to Europe, to Germany, etc., to play football, because then that means you have more English players playing top flight elite football rather than just being pigeonholed in the Premier League. But now they're back to being pigeonholed because they can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So again, we're back to that restriction. So it, I don't necessarily. It might result in more British youth actually getting a game time in the Premier League because the teams like West Ham's can't sign like your Vladimir Sufals, for example, but they might not be able to. But will it actually see more English players playing game time overall in the Premier League when you think about top 10? I'm not actually entirely sure, and I actually think it's just going to become even more restrictive to the youth in this country getting game time.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. There's also a point as well for the other way around. So, you mentioned Jude Bellingham, they wouldn't be able to sign, and Jamal Musiala wouldn't be able to sign for Dortmund and Bayern, respectively, because of the fact that they were between 16 and 18, and so they can't move to Europe. But for players lower down the pyramid who are older, so let's say 21, 22, maybe moving to the German Championship or League One, that players you don't
Yeah.
even really know, they're now blocked off as well because of the same permit issue, which affects a whole host of clubs across Europe of people. You hear all
Mm.
sorts of players that start playing in like Czech Republic, or maybe they start playing in Slovakia because they've fallen out of the English system here. And then sometimes they make really good comebacks and manage to get all the way back, and others maybe don't, but they still have the right to a successful career. And if the opportunity isn't here for them, we've now closing that off, which is a shame, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know I'm Mr. Skeptical, but I've always had this kind of this skeptical kind of prediction that clubs like Dortmund are buying someone like Bellingham because they know after 3 years if they do well, an English club is going to come in and pay top dollar. I know I'm really skeptical. That's always been my fear. So at least that removes that possibility of it just being a money spinning game. But then someone like Sancho has benefited Dortmund so well, so perhaps not.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I completely agree with that one. So it's an interesting point. I think the final point is how are clubs prepping for this change? Because it's not as if they're just twiddling their thumbs. These clubs are huge machines now that have
Yeah.
a variety of rules in place to kind of bypass all these rules and regulations. So I think what we could see is clubs like Sheffield United, Man City, and Watford have affiliated clubs in Europe. So I think what we'll see is a lot of these youth players will still get signed when they're 16 or so from other European clubs. And I think they'll get sent to these nations until they're 18, and then at feeder clubs, and then come back to England to play. So I'm quite
Mm.
interested to see how that's governed, particularly City, because they love breaking the rules. So they've broken like two. I don't know what happens if they do it a third time. Knowing UEFA, they'll
Mm.
probably get a slap on the wrist because they don't really do anything else. But it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see what they do, and also to see if more clubs form partnerships. So, will Man United now then buy or have a affiliation with, I don't know, some club in Czech Republic? Will teams be built more like Red Bull, who we've done a podcast on, where
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
have
Good
these
point.
connections in different countries to then say, okay, we need this guy to stop off here for a little bit. Can he come through? And then when he's 18, he can come to us. So it'll be interesting to see how clubs respond, and more so how that's governed, because it just reeks of like court cases. That does. So it'd be interesting to see how that kind of works out. Or what it could do as well is, make academies smarter. I think the biggest issue we have in this country, right, is okay, if we're 10th, how do we become first? yeah, you have to invest, but loads of these clubs don't really, I don't think, bother enough with their academy systems. The ones that
Mm.
do reap the benefits. So your Leicester, Southamptons, there are some other clubs that don't really, and kind of pay the results. So, it'd be interesting to see if there's more focus on academies. But as you rightly said with your EPP piece, which was about, it feels like 10 years ago, but actually it was only about 7 or 8 months ago. The big clubs have just take him anyway. So it's like, oh yeah, let's develop the next Wayne Rooney, and then Arsenal comes sweeping over and then take him for about 100k, and then you're just there twiddling your thumbs, thinking, right, well, that was a waste of our time. So I think smaller clubs in a lot of this, no matter how I kind of look from it, are at a disadvantage, and the bigger clubs, to be honest, aren't really affected.
Yeah, and they could actually benefit from that. So I mean, it's a good point on the elite player performance ban, because if you think now there's now going to be a squeeze, like a greater demand for British talent, then these larger clubs are going to think, right, there's more of an incentive for them to actually get as many to expand. I don't know if there's actually a limit on academies and centres of excellence. I feel like there should be, because I feel as if like a club like United, for example, will then just try and like buffer out their academy, just create like a huge kind of network of youth players within that, and then just hoover the players up under the EPP, loan those players out if necessary, um, or just release them when it gets a professional contract age if not good enough, and then they'll just benefit. I think getting back to um, the point over the Premier League's elites generally, I think they are unaffected really, because in terms of transfers of first team players, it's not going to affect them. They're signing international players, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter to them really. I mean, in theory, a lot of the Premier League are. I mean, someone like Leandro Trossard going to Brighton, for example, I think he probably would have got a permit.
Mm.
Most of the Premier League is buying international players now, and even some teams in the Championship. But where there are going to be issues players affected by that, it's not going to be first team players going to Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, etc. But yeah, you're right. The West Hams will have to become smarter too and look down the footballing pyramid, which is perhaps something the Premier League has forgotten. I mean, with the revenue in the Premier League and how much it's increased, it has created this like short-termism, which has kind of dictated how clubs behave. The biggest culprit of that in the last 20 years is Sunderland, 100%. And we've paid the price for that. So you buy short term, you buy players for that season, because the thought of getting relegated now that the money is so big is so detrimental that you continue you're basically just paving over the cracks. Debt levels get bigger and bigger, and you're waiting for that like big break where you actually do really well and you stay in the league longer, or you make it to the Europa League and you can kind of pay that debt off and move forward. If it doesn't happen, you end up in League One. So hopefully now, if you can't sign abroad, that means that teams are looking more towards their academies, more low down the leagues, where they're not perhaps running a kind of a wage turnover ratio of over the 100%. They're not spending millions more than they can afford overseas on players that have never played in the country, and it actually then benefits the youth and the mobility coming up. But on that mobility point, um, England does have a unique structure, 4 professional leagues and a vast non-league structure. It's quite unique compared to a lot of nations, even in Western Europe. And I feel like the FA, EFL, and Premier League need to work out how to increase that mobility. I think it will happen naturally with the fact that there's greater demand for English talent, but I don't think it has happened so easily. The fact we had someone like Jamie Vardy, I know he's an anomaly, but the fact he was in non-league for so long, kind of shows that. Che Adams is a good example as well. He's a lot younger when he came up,
Mm.
but he was playing non-league football for a while before he ended up at Birmingham. I think he went somewhere first, but he came to Birmingham, then um, to Southampton. There's been an issue recently about him. He's suddenly said he's committed himself to Scotland.
Yeah, but
Scotland,
Scotland have absolutely, they have Binman as strikers.
you say that, right? But I looked at the squad. Yeah, to be fair, striker wise, but I looked at the
No,
squad. No, it's not too bad.
McBurney, Binman. Who's the other one they have at
Bin
Sheffield?
men.
Who's the other one they have at Sheffield United? Oliver Burke, Binman.
McGoldrick, David McGoldrick.
Is he Scottish?
Oh, I just took off the name. I don't know. He might not be.
Okay, yeah, Bernie, Binman, Burke, Binman. I think Griffiths, Binman. They're all Binman, mate.
So rude.
They have good players in midfield, so they have a very lopsided squad. Scotland. They've got loads of
Yeah,
good
they do.
central midfielders. They've got 2 very good left backs. They've got some good players, but they've just. I looked at the goals of their strikers. It is abysmal.
All right, that's all for this week. Thank you, Etches, for the insight on Brexit and how it will affect football in Britain and in particular England and the Premier League. Some interesting insight there, and I do hope it doesn't end up with the Premier League becoming irrelevant, but given the money, I doubt it will. So yeah, thank you all guys for listening. Please continue to subscribe with us on all our platforms, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.